can hear. I said, okay.
Hi, I'm Tonya G. Tune in every Sunday at 2 p.m. for The Tonya G Show. Let's talk health, politics, business, and more. Interested in being a guest? Email us at viralstreamtv.com. Streaming live on Viral Stream TV on YouTube, powered by the KPG Agency. The Tonya G Show every Sunday at 2 p.m. on Bday 99.1. I'm Tonya G, and welcome to The Tonya G Show. Today, my guest is Dr. Nakeitra Burse, founder and CEO of 6 Dimensions LLC, a certified minority woman-owned public health consulting company. Welcome to the show, Dr. Burse.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it has been a long time in the making. I think I have been trying to sit down with you since maybe March before good old Corona hit, and we have been trying to get you in here. So I am so very happy that you are here. I want you to talk to us about 6 Dimensions LLC and the services you provide.
Okay. So 6 Dimensions, we started out working really on like individual health and like helping communities one person at a time. So by training, I am behavioral health, and so my focus was on like helping the individual person get healthier. And so I used to do personal training and things like that. No, I don't do it anymore. I'm just trying to get myself back in shape. But when I would do personal training and have boot camps, I would really enjoy it. But then there were times when I didn't see the results I wanted to see in the women that were coming to me. And so then I had a baby, and I had all these additional factors that kept me from being able to exercise. And so I understood that a little bit better. And so then I started to think a little bit more and really get more involved on the public health scene. And so I started to see that individual health is only a small component of our health. Like our personal responsibility and the decisions that we make are a very small component. We can't work through this system if we don't have the proper support or the resources. There are policies that keep us from being healthy. So I started looking at health as a bigger picture. And so that's kind of how I really came about with the company.
Okay. Talk to us about how you came up with the name 6 Dimensions.
So in my graduate school program, in my master's degree program at Mississippi State, we would go talk about these 6 dimensions of health and they are physical, intellectual, spiritual, emotional, and occupational health. And those dimensions or components of health, we kind of revolve around like, for me, if my spiritual health is really important to me, so then I really need to focus on getting my spiritual health together, and then all the other components kind of revolve around that. And so I really kind of looked at it as like a Rubik's Cube. And so like when the Rubik's Cube comes out of the package, it's already put together, all 6 sides of it. But then when we as humans start messing around with it, then it gets all off. And we may not ever get it back. We may not, but that's okay. But if we get one side of it, that may be the physical health for me today. So if I got that one side together, then, you know, I'm operating kind of leveled out. Yeah.
Okay. I want you to talk a little bit about your education and your degrees and how long you've been in public health.
Okay. So I've been in public health for a little over 12 years now. And I started out, I got my undergraduate degree at Mississippi State University, and I originally went in as a biological sciences pre-med major, and I failed organic chemistry twice. I failed physics twice. I probably really shouldn't be saying that on the air, but I did. And I knew that medical school wasn't for me. But I also grew up in a small community where I really didn't get a big picture of, you know, public health. I had no idea what public health was. So when I graduated from undergrad, I moved back home to Corinth, and the school district there gave me a job as the AmeriCorps director for the AmeriCorps program.
About it.
Yeah. So I was working in the school system, and I would see like all the things that could be better about the community. It was a great school district, but I saw the things that could be better, and I didn't know how I could have an impact on that without being a physician. And so I was literally in the office one day, and I was Googling like how to help communities without being a medical doctor, literally Googling. Right. And so I ran across public health, and I found out that Mississippi State had a health education program, and I thought that was something I wanted to do. So I went back to Mississippi State to get my master's, and I finished that degree in 1 year, and I had a 4.0. So I knew that was that was probably where I needed to be then. No failing physics. Yeah, I didn't even have to take physics that time. So when I got into that, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed being able to work with communities and just really like getting out there. And I feel like now my impact can be 1 or 100, and I'm not just seeing people, you know, one by one. And so that meant so much to me. And then I've always been kind of an entrepreneur at heart. And so I started really just getting into the field and learning more about public health. And so that's when I went back for my doctorate at Jackson State. And so I have a long history in nonprofit. And so I worked at a nonprofit organization here in Jackson for 6 years and moved all throughout the organization, and I still wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I knew that if I stepped out, I could kind of merge my love for public health with my desire to be an entrepreneur. And so that's kind of how you got started.
So you worked in nonprofit, and I also read that you worked in state government. How did working in those two different fields expand your view and knowledge in the healthcare field?
Yeah, so working with the state government, I know for me, I worked at Department of Human Services, the state office, and so that helped me kind of learn the system of how policies impact communities and community health. But then when you look at the nonprofit side, most of the time a nonprofit may be a grantee of a state agency. And so there were also things that I looked at, how funding, federal and maybe statewide funding, kind of impacts the direction of the work. And so that's really important. We think about that now. So even if you look at something like sex education in the state, so when we're more on the conservative side when it comes to politics, you're going to see abstinence only, abstinence plus. But if we swing more toward the more liberal or less conservative side, then you'll see comprehensive sex ed. And so like the wording matters, and the funding and the policy really matters. And for me, that can make or break like community health. So if we've been trending up and making these big strides when it comes to teen pregnancy or, you know, something in that realm, but then if the funding changes, then that really prohibits some of the work that we can do. And so that's how I always try to tell people that policy, even when you go out and vote on the local level, it plays a role in that individual health. And we don't often connect how policies impact our health, but it really does. And so working in both of those environments really helped me to see
what is needed and okay, how we can change some things. So your focus is on creating healthier communities through strategic, sustainable, and innovative solutions to public health with a focus on health equity and social justice. So this is like a two-part, maybe three-part question for me. Explain to the audience what health equity is and how that differs from health equality and the effects that both have on the African American community.
Okay, so I'm going to start with equality first, because we always, or our civil rights movement really moved us with the equality kind of framework. And equality is we want what you got, and we want what we're owed, the same thing, in which that's not so bad.
Right.
But then when you look at health and what we need as individuals, so if you and I both go into the doctor's office, if I'm a white woman and you're a black woman, we go into the doctor's office, we both have the same issue. How are they going to treat us? And so when we think about equity, it's not about treating everybody the same. It's about treating everybody according, or even groups of people, according to what they need at that moment in time.
Right.
And so I think for me, equity is another step in this whole big social justice fight that we're working on. Because when you think about equality, okay, we're kind of, I won't say we're getting there, but we are moving hopefully in a direction of equity, so that not only providers but our state government, our local governments understand that when you're making decisions, you have to make them based upon what everyone needs and according to the needs of specific communities, and that's not so bad. Right.
I want you to talk about some of the social injustices that you see in the work that you do and how that affects us.
So one of the big things is access to care. When you think about, and I know we'll talk about this some, but maternal health, so the way Medicaid is set up now, if I'm a mother and I, have Medicaid, 6 weeks after I have that baby, I drop off of Medicaid.
Still need care.
But I still need care. And when we look at the numbers, women are dying up to a year after having given birth. And so in that time period of after 6 weeks up to 12 months, if I don't have any care, I'm not going to go get mental health services. I'm not going to go to a physician. I'm not going to go to maybe an urgent care facility, nor am I going to go to just my primary care. And so then that increases my risk much more of having maternal death.
So how do we change that so that we get the access that we need? Policy, I know is one, but how do we change that narrative?
So, and policy is the big thing. Expanding Medicaid is absolutely critical for the state of Mississippi. I think there are only maybe 14 states that didn't expand, and some other states are moving in that direction now. So that is the most critical thing, because if you don't have access to care, you have community health clinics across the state who will take in, people on a sliding fee scale, but still, access is hard, and I don't have the answer to it. I know that policy is a big component of it, but I don't have a great answer right now to that.
I understand. I understand it. So we're going to talk about your Laboring with Hope project documentary, if you will, because you just touched on that, the high maternal mortality rate among Black women compared to other races. Why are we dying at significant rates? I mean, I know you just kind of talked about it, but talk about your project a little bit more.
So part of it is that access to care. That's one part of it. But another part of it is addressing the systems of racism, racism in our healthcare system. And, we often, providers will call it implicit bias, but it is racism in the healthcare system. And so Black women just aren't being listened to. And all of that stems back to when we were first brought to this land. When you look at the slave auction block, when Black women and men were put up, on the auction block to be auctioned off, you have completely no autonomy of your body at that point.
Right.
And so all of that is continue to be perpetuated, year after year, day after day. And so not only is that a big systems thing, but that's also a personal thing. So when we think about breastfeeding in Black women, why are the breastfeeding rates so low? And we're doing all these research studies trying to figure out why Black women don't breastfeed. But if my great grandmother had to serve as a wet nurse for her master's baby, that started the disconnect of breastfeeding in the Black community. And so it may not directly impact me, but that's generational, and it continues to just impact us generation after generation. And so it's racism on the healthcare system and sometimes healthcare provider side. And there are awesome and excellent healthcare providers in our state and across the country, but the reality is that they're working in a system that doesn't work for them. It doesn't work for the community. And so they're doing the best that they can in some situations to just try to navigate that system themselves. And so think about, you're a healthcare provider, the system. And so you're trying to navigate it for people who don't know it. And so, when a woman encounters that system, that's overwhelming.
Indeed. So what does your documentary talk about in Labor with Hope?
So we focus on,
with Hope.
We focus on maternal mortality, maternal death, and maternal illness. And it was a very personal project for me. I had my aunt in 2003 died from complications with birth.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, and so my sister-in-law in 2016 also died.
Oh, wow.
From maternal complications. But then my sister also had she had complications pre-eclampsia, which is high blood pressure, delivered a baby very early in pregnancy and had an 8-month-long stay in the NICU. And unfortunately, her baby didn't make it. And so those are 3 just instances in my family.
Right.
But I also had countless friends and, community members that I knew were going through this same thing. And, first you think, okay, it's a strange turn of events for my family. Right. But then there's a bigger issue. Then you start hearing Serena Williams talking out, Beyonce speaking out. But and I think it's important to note that even the women in my family, and we are very blessed and fortunate to have had advocates, people who were speaking up on their behalf. They had health insurance, they had education, they had a voice for themselves, and they still weren't heard in some cases.
Exactly. Okay, it's a little loud in the mic there, gentlemen. So talk about the statistics of how Black women are dying versus our non-Black counterparts.
Yeah, so the rates across the country are Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than other communities. And our numbers here in Mississippi fall right along with that. But then when you look at some other states like Georgia, it's like 6 times more likely. New York City is like 12 times more likely. And a lot of it is the system, and personal responsibility may be a small part of that, but I always encourage us to look much deeper when we say, oh, well, she should have just eaten better, she should have taken her medication. There are so many other factors, like even when you think about pay, we just come off of Black Women's Equal Pay Day,
right? And
when you think about not having the wages to take care of your family and to have health insurance or to just live.
Exactly.
That plays a big role. And there's this this concept called weathering, and it's really that Black women, all of the social pressures of being a Black woman physically weigh down on your body, and they age your body. And so then they say, well, if they call advanced maternal age at this point 35, which puts you at higher risk. If I'm 35 as a Black woman, I have all of these other stressors, then how old is my body? Exactly. Is it actually older than 35? So then that puts me at a much higher risk as well.
I want to talk, and I know you're not a medical doctor, but one of the problems that Black women face are fibroids, and just the number, because I too suffer from them and had to have a myomectomy about 4 years ago. I had 27 fibroid tumors in and around my uterus. What is going on as to why we are developing fibroids at that rate, and does that affect pregnancy and us being able to carry to term?
Yeah, and I think any medical professional will probably tell you that that does have an impact. And what is it with Black women? At this point, I really don't know. There's a lot of research linking different things to it, but I don't know if there's, at this point, I don't know. And there may be research out there that better states it, but I don't know if it has been pinpointed as to exactly what it is for Black women.
Gotcha. On your website, you speak about the holistic component. How do you incorporate holistic sides or measures to health? And do you feel like just as a whole we are prescribed medicine versus trying to heal ourselves naturally and holistically?
So I think the holistic part is very personal and intrapersonal. So in that's like, even when we think about like freedom and liberation, that starts within. And so I don't think that there's anything that anyone can tell you about holistically being healthy. I think that's a self-discovery journey, and that's just my opinion. Right. And I know other, holistic care and medical professionals will say something different. But I also think that a major part of that and component of that for the Black community is mental health. That's something that we don't always talk about. That's something that has been taboo in our community. And so I think a lot of that starts with us being able to come to terms with mental health as a part of our whole, and being able to address it in the manner that we need to, whether that's therapy or if it's to the point where, medication is an option. But I think for me, when I look more holistically, I'm really looking at your personal behaviors and your personal feelings and thoughts, and being able to just cope with life, period. And so I know that there are spaces where, of course, eating healthier and exercise and all of that play a major role in your health as well.
Yes. On your website and in your bio, it reads that you are a native Mississippian. You are well aware of the impact of poor health on the environment, the economy, and the overall quality of life of individuals and communities. Speak a little bit about how poor health does impact the environment in the community.
So when you think about communities and being able to be healthy and being able to take personal responsibility for my health, if I want to go and walk in my community, but if I'm being chased after by dogs, if there are no sidewalks in my community, and if I don't feel safe, then how am I going to engage in being healthy? But then also when you look at the Black community or impoverished communities, not the Black community, but impoverished communities, when you think about what does that community look like? Are there check cashing places on every corner?
Indeed.
So when you think about the economy, all of these things play a role in how we access the health that we want to have.
You also talk about systems and how we're impacted by systems. What systems are in place and how are we impacted by that?
So we're navigating these systems every day. So it's not just, think about education, the education system. If I have access to a good education, I'm not talking about private school. Right. I'm talking about a good public school education, then my trajectory for life is greater. Right. And, that's also been said to be one of the greatest health inequities is access to education. And then when you think about, of course, we've talked about access to care, but even the social systems like access to mental health, access to just food. Right. Good food that I can have access to. What does the grocery store in my community have? Or is there even a grocery store in my community? One of my colleagues wrote a book about how neighborhoods make us sick. And so part of the book was, it was this white couple that basically moved into a Black impoverished community to try to make change, and they had very good intentions, and but then when they got there, it was a challenge. They stayed there for 7 years, and they talked about it like this slow drip, like when the water keeps dripping, then something else happens, and something else happens, and something else happens. And they talked about how they weren't, they were pretty well off, but still they had to go out of the community 30 minutes.
See what it's like.
They saw what it was like
to live like that.
Yeah, and this, it was it even became a challenge for them to escape the community. It took 7 years because they had all these other issues that continue to, impact them. And so, when you think about that in real time, and living that every day,
exactly,
not by choice.
Exactly. That's a challenge. So I want to talk back again on Medicaid and Medicare and the budget cuts. What can we do, as a community to get those back on the books, to make sure that we have access to those programs? What does the community need to do?
Vote and vote for the right people that have our community, our issues at stake. Don't just continue to put the same people in office if they're not doing anything in our interest. And voting at this point is life or death. It really is. And we don't always think about it that way. But when you look at some of these policies, particularly in our state and federally, it's a matter of life and death. And when you think about Medicaid, for sure. So voting, and then getting engaged with the people that you vote. So voting is one step.
Right.
That's just one step. And you got to hold those people accountable when they get in office, and making sure that they create policies. I didn't realize how easy it was to potentially get a policy, and not policy passed, but to get a policy drafted.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have a relationship with your legislator. And so,
or your lobbyist.
Yeah. Or
Quincy McCurl. Yes. Talk about the need for Black nurses and EMTs and doctors and just different people that are doing what you're doing in the Black community. How needed is that?
Yeah, and so we always say representation matters. It does. I specifically seek out for my OB care Black women doctors.
I as well.
Yeah, but that's whomever you feel comfortable with. So That's one part of it. But it's a critical need to have providers that look like us, that can understand our issues, but there also has to be a pathway to get that. And so we can't, the pathway to try to get a medical degree is, for most in our community, is what? Student loans,
right.
And so, even for me, I have student loans to get all these degrees, but there has to be a pathway to that. And then there has to be a community that supports those providers coming in and keeping them there. I just had a discussion about this. It's critically important that we establish these pathways to health care and public health for our community, so that we can keep the talent here.
Well, so how are we going to do that? How do we get young people, particularly our Black youth, excited about a career in healthcare? Everybody wants to be a rapper. Everybody wants to be into sports, and there really isn't people talking about this sort of thing. So how do we get young people engaged?
Well, and I think there are people that are talking about it. I think it's exposure. That's exposing them to these careers. Having people being represented, showing up in the community, showing up at the schools. If you're a medical doctor, go read at your kid's school. Showing up and being represented there, and I think that's the biggest part of it. Just really showing that representation. I wanted to be a medical doctor because I saw my aunt go off to medical school. My mama tried to be a nurse for years, and she was in nursing school while I was in college, and so that my family motivated me. And so having that type of exposure, but also allowing students to feel and see and do and explore for themselves. And so I think that's a part of it as well.
Wow, we have already gotten down to our last 2 minutes. I still have quite a bit of questions to ask you. So tell us what's on the horizon for Six Dimensions. What's next?
So we're working on quite a few projects right now. One of them is the Mississippi ACE project, which is funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. We're working on that in collaboration with Magnolia Medical Foundation, which is one of our nonprofit partners. We're also working on several projects with the Institute for Advancement of Minority Health. This is another one of our nonprofit partners. So we're working on those projects right now, but also trying to get to a point where we can create some more products, such as maybe not a documentary, another documentary, but other products that will address the systems level issues that we see in the community right now.
Talk a little bit. We have about a minute and a half left. The Mississippi ACE Project. What is that?
So we're trying to improve health outcomes for Black mothers and their babies, and so we're creating some educational components for breastfeeding and doulas. We're trying to really normalize what doulas are and just letting the community know that they're a necessary component in a mother's health. And so we're going to be pairing some doulas with mothers. We're going to be creating a database for doulas across the state where mothers can really access that service.
Well, Dr. Burse, I am elated that you have shared this information with us. This has been so informative and very, very much needed. I'm going to go ahead and read my outro here and how can they contact you? How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so on all social media, it's at 6DIMS, so that's at SIXDIMS.
Okay. I would like to thank Dr. Burse for stopping by to chat with us. Visit her on her website at www.6dim.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Viral Stream TV. We'll see you next time on the Tonya G Show. Thank you for tuning in. Bob knows it's never too early for a final expense policy to protect his son. Sue made sure that all their final expense policies are in place. Helen's final expense policy guarantees she won't be a burden to her daughter. Jane's mother's final expense policy covered her final arrangements and so much more. Your final expense policy can cover funeral services, medical bills, debt, and provide cash security. And there are no medical exams required. Call the KPG agency at 601-500-2751 to set up your policy today. Hi, I'm Tonya G. Tune in every Sunday at 2 p.m. for the Tonya G Show. Let's talk health, politics, business, and more. Interested in being a guest? Email us at viralstreamtv.com. Streaming live on Viral Stream TV on YouTube, powered by the KPG agency. The Tonya G Show every Sunday at 2 p.m. on Bday 99.1.